but so let's talk about medical expenses. So this especially pertains to retirees. Medical expense tax deduction, and including in there qualified long-term care premiums. Okay, which sometimes is overlooked. Now, again, I don't want to be dogmatic. Long-term care insurance is very expensive, and in my experience, most times, if you have funding, if you have the assets to self-fund, I often lean that way because of just the cost and the fact that premiums can change. They can increase throughout the years with long-term care policies, and it's expensive. And I also think there's a place to do. Sometimes people fall into all or none, where they think, okay, I either get long-term care insurance for the whole thing, or I self-fund the whole thing. And you can get a small policy, right? I mean, there's no harm in covering some and not all with the policy. But a couple considerations. A qualified long-term care policy, which I don't have the definition, but just assume it's a reputable long-term care policy, a real policy from a good provider. You can deduct some of those premiums and include it in the medical expenses for the deduction. Now, what I think is interesting is these premiums that you can deduct are limited by an age-based limit, which I think is really interesting. Are you familiar? Are you familiar with how that?
I just pulled it up. I was aware in concept of how the amount you can deduct gets larger the older you are, but I didn't know the limits. I got it in front of me now. Yeah.
Yeah. So it looks like I don't know if I have the right numbers here, but if you're 40 and under, regardless of how much the premiums are, you can only deduct $480. And when I say deduct, you can take this $480. You can add it to your already other medical expenses, and then you have to pass another threshold, right? Yes. Which is the 7.5% of AGI, and then you can start to take those deductions. And I think it's just an interesting topic that I think it can be really valuable, because you can add, if you're 71 and older, 6,000 is the long-term care premium limit. You tack that on to if you are having medical issues, some people really do deduct quite a bit later in life for these medical expenses, right?
Yeah. I've actually seen this with some clients that are single because the standard deduction's smaller than it is married. And not to get too technical, but like the state and local tax cap of $10,000 applies per return, not per person. So now that's temporarily lifted for the next few years under the one big beautiful bill, where it could be up to 40, but let's go back a couple years and pretend we're still there. So like if you were married, standard deduction is roughly $30,000. It's hard to exceed that with standard deductions when you're capped out at $10,000 as a couple in state and local taxes. So then it comes down to really just mortgage interest, which if you own your home outright, like you don't have that. Medical deductions, like you said, that's a high bogey to hit. You combine your total medical expenses need to exceed 7.5% of your gross income. Only on that excess are those then itemizable, and then like charitable donations. So that's really it. So single people were more likely to hit itemized deductions than married, because you can hit that $10,000 state and local tax thing. Then maybe you got home interest, mortgage interest, maybe some deduction, donations, whatever. So point is that I do have a client who was taking itemizing deductions and was getting some benefit for, at least in 1 year, because she had high medical expenses, was getting a benefit for her long-term care premiums. But otherwise, no, this isn't as favorable of a benefit as it may sound, because like you said, to hit this bogey, you have to exceed 7.5% in total of AGI and total medical expenses. Even then, you need to add that to your other itemized expenses. They need to be large enough collectively to exceed your standard deduction. But it's nice that there is a potential benefit to, tax benefit to long-term care premium payments versus none at all. That's separate from, which is a much bigger, more difficult conversation and analysis. Should someone get long-term care insurance? If so, how much? I like your thought process. It doesn't need to be all or none. If you buy enough long-term care insurance to cover you for the worst of the worst 2 or 3 year event, the premiums are going to be so like grossly high, you're not going to do it. But maybe you get enough insurance just to kind of take the edge off, to cover a few $100,000 of total expenses, right? Not $500,000 or whatever. Then the premiums are a little more palatable.
Yeah, and one other point I wanted to make is, if any listeners are ever pitched the long-term care deductibility of premiums, I just want them to be cognizant of, one, it has to be a qualified long-term care policy, and two, it has to be specifically for long-term care insurance, meaning it can't be a rider that is also included in like an annuity
life insurance. Yeah,
or life insurance, because it has to specifically be for long-term care. So if you're paying one premium, you know what I mean, for a policy, then you can't cipher out what is, designated for that long-term care.
That's a great point. And I want to believe that people selling the policy, if they are selling a hybrid insurance or annuity policy that has a long-term care rider, I really want to think they're not going to give them just outright false information to say you can deduct it, but who knows?
Sure. No, yeah. I'm not trying to, trying to say they are, but it's just one thing to keep in mind, because it can be, you start factoring all these things in, and then maybe you start saying, well, I know long-term care premiums are deductible, but just be cognizant of
right.
How that applies.
The opinions and statements presented on this show are for general information only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations. Never make any investment or financial decisions based on information offered on this show without first consulting your financial, legal, or tax advisor. All economic and performance information mentioned on the show is historical in nature and is not indicative of any future results. All indices mentioned on this show are unmanaged and cannot be invested in directly. All information is believed to be from reliable sources. However, we make no representation as to its completeness or accuracy. Lastly, all opinions expressed by Jason Cutitta and any guests on the show are solely their own opinions and do not reflect the opinions of or are endorsed by ToBA Financial. For Jason Cutitta, investment advisory services are offered through ToBA Financial LLC, a registered investment advisor offering advisory services in the state of Hawaii and in other jurisdictions where exempt from registration.